Welcome to the podcast. It's Monday. We're going to talk some NASCAR with Rod Mullins. And Rod, I did not get to see the race yesterday. I was at the UVA baseball regionals, but catching up on things after late last night. It looks like the race came down to, and this is part of the strategy that goes into racing. You're trying to cut it as close as you can on tires and things like that. Ryan Blaney had the lead, looked like he was cruising to a victory, and on the final lap had issues with gas. Man, I tell you what, and Austin Cindric takes advantage. Take us into what happened there.
Well, at least it was a teammate that took advantage of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't as total, somebody out of the back of the pack of Denny Hamlin or somebody that took advantage of it. But Austin Cindric did come up with a win. He broke an 85 race dry spell. He had not won a race since he won the 2022 Daytona 500. And, he did that as a rookie. But then since then, he's been dry up until yesterday. And he was just in the right place at the right time. Ryan Blaney is coming around through there. And then just as you think that Blaney is ready to make the turn to come around and go into four, you start hearing him on the radio and he says, I've ran out of gas. I've ran out of gas. And it was frustrating for them. I know it was frustrating. And again, this goes back to the same thing about when we talk about strategy, we talk about it also has to do with timing. There are so many different factors that go into this, and I can't really begin to try to express to a naysayer about NASCAR, except that that's just a part of the way the race is. The race is won. It's not necessarily how fast you go, or, I know that counts sometimes, but still, when it comes down to the very final lap, you've got to determine mathematically how much gas came out of that gas can, and how much went in it, and if it filled the tank up or not. And, it's a little bit easier now than what it used to be, but I'm sure Ryan Blaney and company, his pit crew, they're kicking themselves over this one, hoping that maybe one way or another they could have got maybe an extra, pit stop somewhere in there to where they could have got a splash and been able to get back into it. But for Austin Cindric, this was just a great weekend for everybody involved. To have two cars in the fight, according to Cindric, eventual 1 and 2, but he was heartbroken. He was heartbroken for the guys altogether with Team Penske and especially with Ryan Blaney.
I read, Rod, that the Team Penske, the group there, had coordinated during the week. Hey, we're not going to take a break. We're not going to take a
Right.
pit stop between stages 2 and 3. Use that to maybe take advantage.
Right.
And then now the one thing they didn't do, and this is where the race is determined.
Mm-hmm.
The individual teams within Team Penske did not share their strategy for when they would go to the pits during stage 3 to get their splash of gas, as you talked about.
Right.
And from what I understand, Cindric went one lap later than Blaney did. So, I mean,
Oh,
I guess if something had happened, if there was a late caution or something like that, he'd have gotten caught up too,
yeah,
caught up too.
that would have made a difference. And and the bad luck didn't just happen for Ryan Blaney in this case. I mean, here we had Christopher Bell, who won at Charlotte, the rain shortened Coca-Cola 600. Here he is, lap 217, and then by this time, Christopher Bell starts slowing up after lap 217. You started seeing a puff of smoke coming out. He says, I'm blowing up. And that's what was going on with it. He managed to finish the race, but he just didn't have enough horsepower to make it around forward, to run with the leaders and so forth. But I'm telling you, Ryan Blaney, going back to this thing, he said, never in my mind did I think that I was short. It's just one of those things. He's proud of the 12 guys that was there in the pits and everything. He said they were fast. He had his work cut out for him as he was trying to hold off Christopher Bell. He said it was a fun battle. He said, just don't know what happened to him. Not until it was explained to him later about the car giving up the engine. But you also had some incidents on the track that happened yesterday. And one of those was lap 140 when Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson got together. And that was the one that kind of surprised me. Um, Kyle Busch was leading this race for a time in the early goings of this race. And people thought, hey, he may be, maybe ready to break this and finally break this streak of what he's got. And then Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch kind of bumping close quarters and so forth. And then just as the number 5 HendrickCars.com Chevrolet breaks loose, it picks up and it throws Kyle Busch into the wall, sending both cars, matter of fact, into the outside retaining wall. And Busch's car, it was just gone. He said, we can't afford days like this. You know, the way he was telling everybody about this, he's winless this year, like I already said. And he said it plain and simple. He said, Kyle Larson got loose and he wiped us out. He said, there's no other way to say it. And that was pretty much the way the race went, with the exception, though, of Carson Hocevar. I think that's the one everybody's talking about today with Carson Hocevar and his performance in this. I mean, he's a rookie this year. He's coming in. He's driving in the Spire Motorsports 77 Chevrolet. He had a whale of a finish yesterday. And for him, I mean, it was just something that was just, I think a lot of people knew it was going to happen soon. They just didn't know when. He finishes 8th on the afternoon. And then I was looking here at just the other top 10 here as they go. Cindric, of course, our winner. Hamlin was second. Keselowski had a good run, too. He finished third. Tyler Reddick in fourth. Joey Logano in fifth. Austin Dillon happened to be one of 3 Chevrolets in the top 10. He came in sixth. Bell at seventh, even with that bad engine. Carson Hocevar at eighth. Justin Haley driving a Ford in ninth, and Kyle Larson rounded out the top 10. And Kyle Larson managed to get back into the race. He didn't have as bad a damage as what Kyle Busch did, but still not a bad performance for them. But for Carson Hocevar, a great run for him altogether in this race.
Larson said on the radio after I read earlier today that he thought Busch didn't give him enough space to get around. So they were kind of pointing fingers at each other a little bit there. Now they're pointing fingers, not trading fists.
That's true. And they're kind of at this point right now where they're both speaking with forked tongues toward each other. But, I don't know if Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson have really taken into consideration. I don't know if they're math majors or not. I know I'm not, but when I know that there's not that much room between me and another car on the interstate, do you think I'm going to honestly try to get up beside of that car and I'm going to, try to go with him going into a turn or going into something on the highway? No, I'm going to back off. But I think they both were just kind of eager to show what they were capable of. Kyle Busch, especially wanting to win more than anything else. And Larson, well, we're still getting to that next question we were probably going to talk about today, the waiver. NASCAR has not said a word about that waiver yet. And there's a lot of the drivers scratching their heads saying, why are we having to wait this long for a decision on a waiver? What is the big deal with this? So I don't know where to put this at. I don't know what's stalling NASCAR about this whole thing altogether.
Oh yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It seemed like a cut and dry decision. Has there been any inkling, any smoke coming out of the Vatican about when they might make a decision?
Well, I've not seen any or heard any smoke down in Daytona Beach about anything. Of course, they have grills and everything else down there, barbecues, but nothing from the NASCAR headquarters. So, this is a good guess. I don't know where this is going to be. I mean, this was just a part of the entire week of all the discussion between Stewart-Haas Racing closing up shop, and we talked about that last week. And I thought Kevin Harvick's comments, especially on his little podcast show that he has, his podcast and TV show that he has on Fox Sports, went from forever, in his case, where he was there, Harvick forever, to for sale in the matter of a short period of time. And he said, it was just surprising to him out of this whole thing. The numbers are out there. The charters are out there. One has already been bought up by Front Row Motorsports. Now the next question is who's going to get involved and who's not going to get involved at this point. So we're still in a question mark about this whole thing with, Stewart-Haas, where they're going to go. Some of the drivers are leaning where they're hopefully going or where this whole staff, I think they told me, I think in some notes or something like that, 120 some people, maybe about 120 some people or more that work at the shops, all going to be out of a job with this whole thing and stuff. And so that's the big thing. That's where and it's not and according to Kevin Harvick, it wasn't a mismanaged company. This was one of those companies that had a kind of a hands-off approach to it. And they must have kept hands off a little bit too much because it just didn't happen for them.
Yeah, I did some math. I did a column last week after we did our podcast, and I did some math on how much it costs to run a NASCAR team.
Hmm.
based on some things I'd found. It's kind of hard to find, definitive information on
Yeah.
that, but putting together the bits and pieces, some of the industry experts estimate that 60 to 80% of your money comes from sponsorship monies because you don't get a lot from NASCAR. They don't share, the
Right.
NASCAR folks don't share the money with the teams.
Yep.
And so when you figure out how much it costs to put a competitive car on the track, the estimates are for a really good competitive car, 25 to 30 million a year. For a team like Stewart Haas, they were putting four cars out there. You're talking 100 to 120 million a year. They're having to
Yeah.
raise 80 to 100 million dollars from sponsors every year.
Right.
And you're right. I mean, as far as all those jobs that are out there, when if other teams, buy a charter and kind of assimilate into their current team structure,
Hmm.
you're likely not going to have those jobs replaced. They're just going to put more work on the guys and gals in their shops already. There'll be drivers out there that always have to drive the cars and crew chiefs and that kind of thing. But for those people back in the garage, you're likely to see those jobs just kind of assimilate into the rest of NASCAR. And it's still a big issue. I mean, the NASCAR team owners are saying we'd like 45% of that money, NASCAR's of TV money.
Hmm.
NASCAR is saying we'll give you 25%, and that's
No.
from what they're getting.
Yeah.
That's a huge discrepancy.
That's a big discrepancy.
Yeah, and these teams aren't profitable. Michael Jordan said that. It's kind of some reporting we've been doing on these
Hmm.
podcasts the last several weeks. These teams aren't profitable as it is, and I don't think Stewart Haas leaving is any indication of anything other than we're just kind of tired of having to play this game.
Right. Well, and I agree too. And the 25%, and I kind of made that ooh at that bristle, that sound and stuff of it. I don't understand why NASCAR can't go and come up with some kind of a package of where it's kind of a sharing package, a profit sharing package with, say, for example, they get so much of the TV rights of the money that comes through. And we've talked about that before. But why can't they get a little bit of the share of, say, perhaps a little bit of the advertising money that comes through there and stuff? Because, I mean, this is entertainment. This is what it's for. And, you could tie in this whole thing of a NASCAR team package to some kind of potential advertiser or potential sponsor on your car, and then say, hey, look, your money is going to helping support this team. Well, that's one way of having sponsorship on your car, just another way of having another form of sponsorship. But Xfinity, it's almost like Xfinity sees the writing on the wall with this. We're in a situation where they're going to probably pull out after this year in the Cup race, the sponsorship along with Geico and Coca-Cola in there as well, and they're going to pull out, and they're going to be looking for something else. And people may ask, well, what's the big deal? Cord cutting, folks. We're losing more, people by cord cutting cable than anything else that you could imagine. Internet is going to be the thing that's going to take over, and we're already starting to see the mishmash, so to speak, of what's going to be with the internet. You and I've talked at length about this whole thing about, where does Amazon come into this whole thing before it's over with? I think Amazon ends up being a player in this deal before it's over with. I mean, they're
And
going to get in there, but they're going to be
potentially
big.
and potentially Netflix and Apple.
Yeah.
Netflix spent or committed $5 billion,
Mhm.
$5 billion for 10 years of WWE programming.
Mhm.
Apple TV is spending a lot of money, like Amazon, on sports. Apple TV is, got baseball, MLB, a game of the week, a couple games on Friday nights each week, and
Mhm.
and so I mean, yeah, they're going to be bidding against each other. So there's money. It's just not the traditional money we're used to, where it's coming from linear TV or cable TV.
Right.
And these Netflix and Apple and Amazon and whoever else might emerge, they're throwing it out there like they're Saudi Arabia or something like that.
I might be a little bit, overboard on this, but I think we're starting to see the potential, the beginnings of the demise of broadcast networks.
Mhm.
I think it's starting to go. I think it's starting to erode a little bit faster. Everybody's already spoiled on this thing of, TV that they can go and they can watch whenever they want to go and watch. Uh, you know, I mean, for myself, I think when I get home, I sit down in the evening. I don't really go to the networks that much. I go maybe to the local affiliate to kind of catch up on news, but entertainment, I can't tell you the last time that I've actually been on a network channel. Used to be, I was, really like to watch NCIS an awful lot on CBS. And now that's kind of faded off. But, it's kind of like, what do? I go home and I start flipping on Pluto TV.
Yeah.
Pluto's free. I mean, you've got Tubi out there, you've got all these other channels, and they're advertising during NASCAR races too. They just started, I think Tubi ran some ads during the NASCAR race this past weekend, and they've also been on some sponsorship on a couple of the cars. This is just more potential out there for these races to be distributed all the way across the board, and they don't have to listen to the networks tell them, you can't do this, you can't do this. Fox has kind of been hogtied, and I think that this has been the big reason. And NBC, same thing. Peacock, the same thing with it. When you have multiple outlets like FS1, FS2, and then you've got NBC with Peacock, you've got CNBC, which really has no business having NASCAR racing on there, or racing for that matter, period. And then you've got USA Network, and you've got all these different networks that are under the umbrella of NBC. You start wondering after a while, hey, I want to at least go to one channel to where I can watch this racing action, consistent racing action, sort of like the Formula One thing that they've got going in Europe. You want to be on that to where the same announcers, everybody's on the same page. You don't have this kind of split in between of NBC going to Amazon, going to Warner Brothers, going to CW, and then going back to NBC toward the end of the year. We're in a state of, I call it right now, controlled chaos is what we're in right now about this whole thing. And even though they signed this media deal and it looks all, nice and shiny on the outside, the more you rub on it, eventually it's going to get dull. And that's what I think is happening to it right now.
Even that Netflix deal with WWE that I mentioned
Mhm.
has a 5 year out, because I think both sides recognize, hey, this could really, I mean, the world is changing, and it's been
Mhm.
changing. The media world's been changing for the last 20, 25 years. We've seen it on the print side. Print newspapers are
Oh,
pretty much gone away, almost entirely gone away. That's why Augusta Free Press exists. Well, we've been in business 20 years entirely online because, I don't know. I don't want to take credit for having seen the writing on the wall, but maybe we did. And it's weird that it's taking broadcast and cable and streaming services so long to catch up. But I will say that the one thing in TV that's going to always have value is live sports,
mhm.
because we all have our phones with us 24/7. You can't just tape the game or tape the race
Mm-mm.
and somehow avoid seeing what happened. Because if you have your phone and you look at it, you're going to see the result if you're trying to, wait until you get home to watch the race. So they still got you. That the only appointment TV, whatever you want to call it, appointment TV, appointment streaming that still exists and will always exist, is the race time, the game time, etc. Because once that's over with, it's out there, and if you're a fan, you're going to know about it. So you might as well watch it live.
We're still a ways off from this happening, but how much longer is it going to be before we actually go to virtual, watching everything virtual, and not just through the TV, but putting on, the goggles or whatever, and then sitting there in your couch, the comfort of your home, being able to watch these races, and you are a spectator. You buy a ticket out of it. Everybody else buys into it, and then you get all this different sort of thing before it's said and done. NASCAR.com has it now to where you can listen to various scanner channels. You can get some of the different camera angles and from some of the different drivers. How long is it going to be before NASCAR finally, they probably already are, fooling around with the idea of it, but then riding side by side with your own driver. If you are a Denny Hamlin fan and you want to ride with Denny Hamlin, here you are. You're at Bristol, and you get the feeling of what it's like to ride at Bristol, or you can be back up in the stands. It doesn't make any difference. We're a ways off from that, but still, you see where the direction's going. We're getting to where this thing is going to be almost in a way out of the hands of the fans, so to speak, and then put back into the hands of NASCAR. And then it's like, where do we go from here? And we've got to trust that NASCAR is going to be able to lead us through the wilderness and get us through and part the Red Sea and get us home, which I'm not holding my breath too much on that one. I hate to be that way about it, but I've seen some bonehead moves by NASCAR over the last, gosh, 30 years. Some of them have been real good. Some of them have been really, I mean, head scratchers. So we're kind of left in that same situation now.
Far as live events go, live sporting events go, I had experience. It's been more than 10 years ago now, but I worked for a few years with a couple companies, and even started my own for a year in the wrestling business. And I've talked about this on some of the podcasts, and it's relevant here. Where one of the shows we did, we were getting ready to do a live TV show, a live pay-per-view TV show, and the lead up show to that, we wanted to get some tape of our of all the performers, all the wrestlers going to be on the TV show. We wanted to get them doing promo segments, interview segments, and also some matches to have footage to use on the broadcast that we were going to do about a month later. And so the event we did that at didn't have the ticket sales we expected, right? So we had an 1,800 seat arena, about 900 people bought tickets. We moved everybody opposite the camera. We reseated everybody so that it looked like that place was packed. And ever since that experience, I have had this, whenever I go to a college or pro game of any kind, basketball, football, baseball, I've kind of had the observation that when you go to the event, you're paying to be part of the TV show.
Well, I mean,
you're part of the background of the TV show.
Well, Mike Joy said something yesterday, and I had to really scratch my head about it. And I'm like, oh, now I'm starting to see why people are questioning Mike Joy about some things. He said that, World Wide Technology Park in St. Louis yesterday, Gateway Raceway, as they call it, was sold out. No, not according to what I saw. And one of the clips, I think, and you go into one of the turns, very sparse amount of people, unless everybody decided at one point during the race to go to the bathroom, or it was, for that matter, it was maybe before the race they were showing some footage of the track, but they didn't look sold out to me. They may have been sold out on the front stretch coming down through there at the start finish line and before and after, but definitely not sold out. So that's another thing too. NASCAR doesn't give numbers. We've never heard, they'll say sell out, but we don't know the exact number, how many, and then how many of those people actually benefited from using those tickets. We'll never know, because NASCAR does not give that type of, number or figure for somebody to go and, I guess, number crunch and say they're lying about something. Something's just not right here, the way it figures out.
Yeah, they're a private business. They don't have to give those numbers out.
Exactly.
So, whereas the professional sports leagues, the colleges and universities, at least that are publicly funded, have to give that information out. The private ones don't. So, no, it's and WWE has been really good over the years. I keep bringing WWE up here, but they've been really good over the years of massively inflating their numbers. They claimed they had 90,000 at WrestleMania 3. It was more like 7. I mean, it's still 75,000 a lot, but it's not 90,000. That's just one example of many of their chicanery with numbers. But it is what it is as far as that goes. But yeah, things are changing as far as that goes. Things are changing. Hey, I was gonna maybe, as we wrap up the podcast here, Rod, we started with talking about a guy who ran out of gas. Right. Before we hit record, I asked you, have you ever been in a car? Did you ever run out of gas? And I think your answer was no, but you were close, right?
I've sputtered. I have sputtered.
Okay.
There have been times of where I was driving in the intake and going in for the run back there, and I felt a sputter. And then what did I start doing? This was on the old cars. This is when you could still do the NASCAR slosh. You could go back and forth, and you could get the gas to move around, and for the pickup and everything. But not now with these electronic fuel injection engines. No, so.
One time, so when I was just starting out as a reporter, didn't have a lot of money, reporter jobs didn't pay a lot. I had a vehicle that broke down, had to buy a car real cheap. A cousin sold me a car. I think it was a station wagon it was maybe $200, $100 or $200.
Wow.
It was it was this, and this station wagon was all the heck. Had 125,000 miles on it, but it ran. The one thing he didn't tell me when he sold me the car was that the fuel gauge, when it got to a quarter of a tank, was actually empty.
Oh.
I found this out halfway between Stanton and Waynesboro one day. And I'm like, what's going on here? I mean, did my car break? Because I'd never been in a car that had run out of gas before. So I'm thinking something was happening here. Called my dad. My dad, said, Chris, I think you're out of gas. And
Oh
we
my
we
gosh.
went and got a gas can and got some gas. And then from that point on, yeah, every time I got to anywhere near a quarter of a tank, I was going back to the gas station. But yeah, that's a hard thing to find out without being told ahead of time.
Yeah, and I've lived with my wife and stuff. My wife, I don't know. I can't remember if she's actually run out of gas or not. I know she's had some relatives that ran out of gas a couple of times and so forth. And I can remember her grandfather telling the story or making sure, they haven't made a car yet. You've got to wean it from gas. You've got to be able for it to run on something. And my dad would tell me the same thing. He'd say, they ain't figured out a car that can't run on gas just yet. You're going to have some, so you need to get it. So, but
And this station wagon was too big for me to Fred Flintstone it too. So
wow.
it had a lot of weight to it. It didn't have much anything else, but it had a lot of weight to it. So
One of those National Lampoon vacation type cars. Is that
it
what it
was
was?
it
Yeah.
was pretty
Okay.
much, yeah, yeah, and it came with its own. The car at least had been to Sweetbriar College. It had a big old bumper sticker I couldn't get off. It said Sweetbriar. I think that car lasted me 6 months, and I finally, started making enough money at the newspaper I was at to buy a quasi new car. So, but it got me around for a while, except for that one day.
Well, I can tell you this much, even though we probably between us and everything, we can't afford we can not can afford the gas right now and everything, but we sure can't afford being able to run a NASCAR operation like some of these guys are, like you were talking to earlier about this whole thing and stuff. And man, I'm telling you, you breaking down these numbers, and yeah, you were right. I've never really put down the numbers as it would be, but it's just unreal. You just think about this, and then to lose a race just by running out of gas, it
Yeah,
just
yeah,
doesn't seem
yeah.
possible.
Yeah, that puts it all in perspective. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're paying $30 million to run a car for a season, and you lose a race because you run out of gas, and the guy who wins the race only has one lap or less of gas left. So I
Yeah.
mean, that's how close it can be. Yeah,
True story on this though, and this is true story. The guy that co-owns the Morgan McClure dealerships, Tim Morgan, he was a gas man on Ernie Irvin's car. Now at Bristol, when they won their first race in like 90, they didn't have any problem there or anything about gas. But when they got to Daytona and the 91 Daytona 500, Tim Morgan sat back there, and what he did this mathematics. I don't know where in the world you come up with this formula, what you did, but he was trying to put together all these numbers and he put it down. And Tony Glover came to him and he says, is he going to have enough? Is he going to have enough gas to finish the race? And I think the story goes, Irvin was on fumes when he crossed the finish line. And so that's the exact kind of thing that you want. You want to be able to, but then again, that was the thing of the slosh going back and forth. If you go up and you go down, you go up and you go down, you're just slinging the gas around in the tank. As long as it goes into the intake and then it takes off to the engine, you're fine. But when you don't have anything there, you're just out of luck. And that's exactly what happened to Ryan Blaney yesterday. It's just unfortunate that it happened, but hey, it's part of racing. It's part of the strategy. It's part of all this stuff that a lot of people, I think, take for granted about NASCAR.
yes,
I've said this before too. I think that NASCAR ought to make a stronger push to get themselves involved, especially in middle school education, especially in STEM, math, and science, more than anything else, because there are so many different things that you can apply with this. But it's almost like NASCAR just says, here, go to it, teach it. And it's like, it's very limited stuff. And it's like, these kids could be learning a whole lot out of this stuff about not just race cars, but also practical applications for their own car. Because what are we producing? It seems like we're almost producing robots that are just going to go out there and just say, okay, time to get gas and stuff, but not figuring mileage and how much you've got in between, even though the computer does that on your car anymore. Still, it's one of those things of using your head.
I think it could help draw more fans. There are a
Yeah.
couple of my friends that I've tried. I mean, I wouldn't say that they're NASCAR fans now, but when I've sat down and watched a NASCAR race with them and explained strategy, And we probably sat and watched a race for an hour, which is probably the entire hour of their life they've watched NASCAR.
Hmm.
And at towards the end of that hour, they say, I can kind of see it now. I can kind of
Yeah.
see why people like this now. And so, getting that education out there more, it's not just left turns and guys jumping out of cars and punching each other.
Nope.
There's a lot to it that, that NASCAR could certainly benefit from if they would do that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Educate the kids, educate the adults who might see that this is more than just grease monkeys out there and good old boys driving around in circles. There's a lot to this.
Yep. Agreed.
Well, that's great. Hey, Rod, let's keep the streak going. No more run out. Don't run out of gas. Do the math. Do what you got
Okay.
to do.
I'll do that.
And of course, as always, thanks for your time and insight. We'll look forward to talking again next week.
Okay. Appreciate it, Chris. Thanks.